Hello everybody, this is Marcel from Morgan coming to you with another video. This one is going to focus on Hollywood and the media um, and the depiction of our darkest time here in American history, which is slavery. Somebody once said slavery could not have been that bad. And that was the idiot Charles Barkley, the deep, you know, Aristotle of this generation, apparently. Now, why would he say something like that? I've said before in two other videos that it has something to do with his upbringing, and I think a lot of it has to do with the media and Hollywood's portrayal of slavery. There's a right-wing reporter who once said, talking about 12 Years a Slave, and let me read it to you. His name was James Bowman, and he wrote, if ever in slavery's 250-year history in North America there were a kind master or a contented slave, as the nature of things there must have been here and there, we may be sure that Mr. McQueen, who directed 12 Years a Slave, does not want us to hear about it. This in turn surely means that his view of history of the American South is as partial and one-sided as that of the hated Gone with the Wind. Wow. My best friend in the entire world is a conservative Republican. He's one of the few people that I would, outside of my family, that I'd take a bullet for. But even he disagrees with this. How dare you, man, wonder where the happy slaves are in this movie? You've been watching too many damn Hollywood movies, and we're talking about a Hollywood movie. I get that. But that's the problem. Hollywood doesn't make the proper slave movies. If you're going to make a slave movie, at least do one where you show the slaves revolting, where you show the slaves fighting back, where you don't get people like this who seem to think they were just happy for 400 years. Oh, I'm just happy to be with Massa. Just happy that Massa's raping my daughter right now, even though she's 8 years old. I was happy. This is the kind of attitude that a lot of people have over that part of American history. And it's because of Hollywood. They have a bad habit of showing black slaves happy and content, that they never fought back. Just glad to be away from Africa. Just glad to be civilized by the white man. That's the problem. You wonder why people like Charles and Mr. Bowman say things like that. They don't take the plight of black slavery seriously. They just don't. They believe that we were happy, like I've said over and over again. They just say, why was this such a bad thing? I just saw, a black guy in a Hollywood movie singing zippity-doo-dah, zippity-a. He seemed happy. Really? Okay, think about it. If black people had slave movies along the lines of Schindler's List or The Pianist, or any movie made about Anne Frank, I think we would look at it a little bit differently. And what I mean is, you would never, ever, 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 ever see a lead in a Holocaust movie that's happy the Germans are killing and enslaving their people. That's just not something you'd ever see. But you see it all the time with black slave movies. You see it all the time. They never show the rage and the fighting spirit my ancestors had in trying to get their freedom and trying to get away. They never show that. They never showed their never-ending quest for freedom. They had it. They fought. They died trying to get free for 400 years. Where are these movies? Where are they? We see movies about white slaves fighting and dying for their freedom. Spartacus. Then you have the movie Gladiator. The lead fights for his freedom and is willing to accept nothing less than that. He even kills the damn emperor at the end. Now he dies, but he dies for freedom. Then you have Braveheart. William Wallace's last words were freedom before they draw and quartered him. And everybody was like, that was so great. Look at that man, not just struggling for his freedom. I ain't never seen a movie where a black slave struggled for his freedom. You know, Roots doesn't count. TV miniseries. I'm talking about a movie. You know, we get movies like Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's nothing like the book. Depicts black slaves as happy-go-lucky dancing around during the auction. Yes, I dance for massa. I hope you buys me. And gives me some of those pigs feed cows' tongues. Yuck. You know, then you have the affectionate dark-skinned mammy that just loved her little white babies and didn't care if her own got sold because, well, they did. Constantly. Every day. Gone with the Wind. Some people say this is the greatest movie ever made. Tells a romantic story about the South and the Civil War. Had a lead character whose name was actually Mammy, who could not even function without her white masses. Showed slaves as docile. Hattie McDaniel is her name, by the way. And loving to the whites that owned them. Now, she was the first black woman to win an Oscar for that role. They rewarded her, and I'm glad that a black woman won. Don't misunderstand, but you won for that? But I guess back then, though, they didn't have too many options for roles. You know, Bojangles, Hattie McDaniel. I mean, there just weren't that many options. There are now. Then you had Song of the South. It's a movie where a young white kid moves back to the South and is comforted by a happy ex-slave who tells stories about mythical animals. Yeah, pretty much stereotypes of black people. And this movie was made by Disney, but if you really look at Disney, Disney don't like black folks, and Disney definitely doesn't like Jews. So that's just obvious. You know, I love some of their cartoons, but they don't like Jews or black people. Let's just be real. Then you had The Littlest Rebel. The movie stars Shirley Temple, who played the youngest member of a plantation-owning family during the Civil War. And when Fort Sumner was attacked, her father is sent out to be a scout for the Confederate Army. She is left in care of an Uncle Tom named Uncle Billy. At least they didn't name him Uncle Tom. Who is shown to be happy and content to be a slave and subservient. Other blacks are shown to be afraid of the Union soldiers. Oh, you can't take me away from my massa. What is it that I do? And they don't want to leave slavery behind, wishing and dreaming they can remain in bondage to the gracious white man forever. I'm sure it's one of Barkley's favorite movies. And you had the movie Glory. Denzel won an Oscar for being an angry black man that learns not to hate white people. It's a fantastic movie. I've seen it twice, and it was a little more than that, but that's kind of the gist of his character. You know, the movie didn't center around the black battalion. It centered around Matthew Broderick, the white leader of this battalion, which was ridiculous to me. But hey, you know, as long as he learned to love and respect the white man as his boss, we're all good. You know, like I said, Roots is about as close as I've ever seen, you know, where the slaves are willing to fight and die for their freedom. You know, James Amos's character even loses half of his foot trying to escape, you know, and coincidentally enough, O.J. Simpson was in that movie chasing down slaves who tried to run away, which is not too far from how I think he really is. That's for another day. So, we get movies like this all the time. But we don't see black slaves who are willing to fight, die for what every man, woman, and child on this planet deserves. Freedom. Did black slaves fight to be free? Hollywood says no. History says goddamn right they did. Now, I'm going to go into some of the slave revolts that should be made into movies. But Mr. Barkley should watch the HBO miniseries Unchained Memories, and Mr. Bowman too. It was a movie that was released in 2003 with interviews done in the 1930s with former slaves that talk about their experience and what slavery did to them. So you're going to be able to hear from the mouths of people that actually experienced slavery in the 1930s. Think about that, the 1930s. It wasn't that long ago. We act like slavery was 1,000 years ago. We're at 150 years. We're at 50 years for the civil rights movement. We got a long way to go, people. Now, there were reported 313 slave rebellions. And some of them need to be made into movies. The Stono Rebellion, 1739. It's the largest slave revolt ever staged in the 13 colonies. So it was Sunday, September 9th, 1739, during the day of free labor, when 20 slaves under the leadership of a man named Jimmy provided white slaveholders a lesson in how badly Africans wanted their freedom. Most of the members of this freedom fighting party were seasoned soldiers from the Yamasee War or their experiences they had in their homeland in Angola. They raided a warehouse, began executing the white owners and placing their heads on stores and front steps for all to see. They moved from house to house, killing the occupants and burning the houses down afterwards. They marched through the colony towards St. Augustine, Florida, where under Spanish law they would be free. Not all the slaves in the journey joined in, but they ran into many, as I'll call them now, Barclays, or house Negroes, who actually helped their white masters. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Who actually helped their white masses. But soon the numbers rose to about 100. These freedom fighters fought off the English for more than a week before the colonies rallied and killed most of the freedom fighters. Now that's a story of heart, determination, will, strength of the human spirit. Then there was the New York City conspiracy in 1741. This one wasn't really a revolt, so to speak. It was more or less in a city of 7,000 whites. They were determined to put each and every one of the 1,700 blacks in this city under the boot heel of them. Fort George burned to the ground. Fires sprung up all over the city, as many as 4 as one day. I'm pretty sure Mr. Barkley would call these people thugs, scumbags, and criminals. You know, that's just what he does. And in New Jersey and Long Island, some of the whites claimed to have overheard their slaves bragging about doing this. And they concluded that this was a revolt planned and executed by a secret black society inspired by priests and other Catholics that were white, brown, black, free, and slave. It's like everybody thought that it was a good idea for us to be free and fought for it. They were never caught, but some did pay the price. A 16-year-old Irish indentured servant under arrest for theft claimed to know who set these fires. In the end, 30 black men, 2 white men, and 2 white women were executed for these fires. There's a slave rebellion in 1811. A man named Charles led the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. It took several years, but he organized 200 to 500 slaves of different backgrounds. Some were from Haiti, some were from Africa. He overcame the language barrier, and on January 8, 1811, armed themselves with hoes, axes, cane knives, hacked up their masses, and marched west, where they met with slaves from other plantations and continued on. They burned every plantation they came across. They were soldiers, freedom fighters, not murderers. They spared the lives of the women and children. You want to tell me this wouldn't make a great movie? They were eventually caught and executed. You could even have Charles at the end go out like a hog, like Braveheart did, like William Wallace did. Then there was the Creole slave revolt. Slave ship was headed for New Orleans with a cargo of 135 slaves. Yes, Charles, Mr. Barkley, we were once called cargo, but, slavery wasn't that bad. Moving on. Now on this ship was the real-life Django. This would have been a better story than the one Tarantino did, I think. His name was Madison Washington. He was one of the ship's cooks. And all I keep thinking of with ship's cook is Under Siege with Steven Seagal, but that's something totally different. And he was a man who escaped slavery. He ran to Canada. He was from Virginia, but he came back for his wife, Susan. He was on that ship because he got caught trying to get to his wife. But as soon as the ship left port, he began sailing Atlantic. He and 18 other slaves began to make escape plans. One night, the ship's mate began to suspect something was wrong, confronted Washington, and Washington fought back. He sparked the riot. It had begun. The slaves rushed their captors, killing one of them, wounding the captain, and they were now in control of the ship. Now, unlike the slaves in that movie Amistad, these freedom fighters were versed in the laws of slavery, sailing, and geography. They knew to head to the Bahamas where slavery was illegal. They knew enough about navigation not to be fooled into changing course. When they arrived, all the slaves were free but Washington and the 18 that took the ship. They were tried and found not guilty and set free. This story has a fantastic happy ending for Washington. His wife Susan was aboard the Creole the whole time, and they were reunited. That sounds like a great movie to me. And there are many, many more. Nat Turner, Wesley Harris, and the great Gaspar Yanga. Now, if Hollywood made these movies, maybe my ancestors would be thought about differently. Maybe today, black people like Charles Barkley would be able to look back and say, damn, those people were strong and tough and did not accept being a slave. They fought and fought just like any other human being would. And I am so goddamn proud to come from them. And that's how I see it.